All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to dive in.
Today, we're tackling something that I think is going to resonate with pretty much everyone listening. Overconfidence.
Oh, yeah. Fascinating one for sure.
And to guide us through this, we've got this book, Overconfidence, Human Vulnerabilities, and the Illusion of Control.
It's a real eye-opener.
Now, before we get lost in the details, could you maybe just quickly lay out what exactly we mean by overconfidence? Is it just like, that one coworker we all have who thinks they're always right?
Well, it can definitely manifest as arrogance.
Yeah.
But overconfidence is actually much more than just, having a big ego.
Okay, so what is it then?
At its core,
Yeah.
it's this kind of systematic miscalibration of our judgment.
A miscalibration.
Yeah, like we tend to overestimate our abilities or our knowledge or even the amount of control we have in certain situations.
Uh-huh.
It's like this disconnect between how good we think we are at something and how good we actually are.
So it's not just about being like a jerk. It's like a fundamental flaw in how we see things.
Exactly. A flaw in our perception, you could say. And it can show up in pretty predictable ways.
Like what?
Well, for example, think about how many people claim to be above average drivers.
Oh, yeah.
Statistically, that's just not possible, right?
True. I mean, someone has to be below average.
Right, but almost everyone thinks they're in the top tier. And it's not just driving, it pops up everywhere. Financial decisions, career choices, even relationships. People consistently overestimate their chances of success.
And that can be a problem, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. It can lead to some pretty disastrous consequences.
Okay, so this overconfidence thing is like super common and potentially harmful.
Yeah.
Why haven't we evolved to be more, realistic about our abilities?
Well, believe it or not, overconfidence can actually be advantageous, at least in certain contexts.
Real?
From an evolutionary standpoint, projecting confidence, even if it's not entirely earned, can have its benefits.
Like what? Wouldn't it lead to more risk-taking and maybe even dangerous situations?
It can, for sure. But think about it this way. If you appear confident, you might seem more attractive to potential mates or more persuasive in social interactions.
Oh, I see.
And you're more likely to be seen as a leader.
So, there's this social currency that comes with confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And in a competitive environment, that can be a huge advantage.
So we're kind of hardwired to be overconfident because it helped our ancestors survive and reproduce.
In a way, yeah. But that still doesn't fully explain why we're so bad at accurately assessing our own skills and limitations.
Right. So what's going on in our brains that makes this happen?
Well, our brains are amazing, but they also like to take shortcuts.
Shortcuts?
Yeah, mental shortcuts are called heuristics. It's a way for our brains to simplify decision-making.
So we don't get bogged down with, analyzing every single detail of every situation.
Exactly. It's efficient. But these mental shortcuts, while useful, can also lead to systematic errors in judgment. And one of the biggest culprits here is something called confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. Isn't that where we kind of filter out information that doesn't fit with what we already believe?
Yes. We tend to seek out and remember information that confirms our existing beliefs and ignore evidence that contradicts them.
So we're basically building these little echo chambers in our heads.
Pretty much. And this confirmation bias plays a huge role in fueling overconfidence.
Makes sense. So if you think you're a great public speaker, for example, you're going to focus on the times you nailed it and forget about those awkward presentations where you totally bombed.
Exactly. We create these self-serving narratives that just reinforce our overconfidence.
Ouch. I think we've all been there. So we're not exactly the most objective observers of our own abilities.
Not always, no.
Yes.
And you combine this confirmation bias with our evolutionary tendency towards confidence, and, well, you can see how it can lead to some pretty big miscalculations.
Yeah, that's starting to paint a clear picture. But hold on, shouldn't life experience eventually, knock some sense into us?
You think so, right?
We make mistakes, we learn from them, we adjust our behavior, right?
Well, it would be nice if it worked that way. But there's another catch. Even when we do receive feedback, we don't always interpret it in a way that helps us grow.
I mean, even when we fail, we convince ourselves it wasn't really our fault.
Often, yes. We might blame external factors or bad luck, or even, the incompetence of others.
So basically, we're the unreliable narrators of our own lives.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
This tendency to protect our self-image further shields us from really seeing our own limitations.
Wow, this is a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it?
It's kind of unsettling, to be honest. Like, how much are our brains working against us?
That's a good question, and one we'll keep exploring as we dive deeper into this topic.
So, wow, this is heavy stuff. It's a little unnerving to think about how much our brains distort things.
It is, but, it's not all bad news.
Oh, tell me more.
I mean, we were talking about the downsides of overconfidence, but are there ever times when it's actually, like, a good thing?
I don't know. I guess I always think of it as kind of a negative trait.
It definitely has its pitfalls, but overconfidence, or maybe we should say optimism, or a strong belief in yourself, can be really powerful.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about, like, Steve Jobs. His absolute unwavering belief in his vision, even when, like, everyone else was doubting him, it was huge in the success of Apple.
Yeah, that's true. He was famous for that, wasn't he? Like bending reality to fit what he wanted.
Exactly. And while that level of self-belief can sometimes backfire, it can also be super inspiring and motivating, not just for the person, but for the people around them.
So in some cases, a bit of overconfidence can actually drive innovation and creativity.
Absolutely. Imagine if artists or entrepreneurs or scientists, were constantly second-guessing themselves.
Yeah.
We might never see any groundbreaking discoveries or cool new inventions.
Okay, I'm seeing your point. So it's not about getting rid of overconfidence completely, but more about, I don't know, learning to use it in a positive way.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance, and a big part of achieving that balance is cultivating humility.
Humility.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that a couple of times, but honestly, I'm not sure I totally get how it fits in with all this overconfidence stuff. Aren't they kind of opposites?
Not really, no. Humility isn't about, like, lacking confidence or feeling inadequate. It's more about having an accurate, a realistic view of your strengths and weaknesses.
So being self-aware, recognizing that you don't know everything.
Exactly. It's about being open to feedback, learning from your mistakes, and being willing to change your mind when you get new information.
Okay, I get that. But how do we actually do that? I mean, how do we cultivate humility? It seems like the world rewards the opposite, like being bold and always promoting yourself.
It's definitely a challenge, but I think it starts with changing our perspective a little bit. We need to recognize that true strength isn't about always being right, but about admitting when you're wrong.
So embracing our imperfections, seeing them as opportunities to grow.
Yes, exactly. Every time you make a mistake, it's a chance to learn something new and become a bit wiser.
That's a much more positive way to think about it. But, let's be real. It's easier said than done. Nobody likes to admit they messed up.
Of course not. It takes courage and vulnerability to acknowledge your shortcomings, but it's so worth it in the long run.
I'm convinced about the benefits of humility, but I'm still kind of fuzzy on the how-to. Like, how do we actually put this into practice? Where do we even start?
Well, one simple but powerful practice is to cultivate a habit of gratitude.
Gratitude. Wait, what does being thankful have to do with humility?
When you focus on what you're grateful for, it shifts your attention away from, just yourself and your own perceived flaws. It reminds you that you're not the only one responsible for all the good things in your life.
So like acknowledging the role of luck or other people or just circumstances.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly humbling.
That's really interesting. I never thought of gratitude as a path to humility.
It really is. Another practice is to seek feedback from others. And I mean honest feedback, not just people who'll tell you what you want to hear.
Ooh, that one can be tough. I think we all have that one friend or family member who, loves to give it to you straight.
Yeah, it can sting sometimes, but it's so valuable. Surround yourself with people who will challenge your assumptions and give you a reality check when you need it.
And I guess the key is to actually be open to that feedback, even if it's not what we want to hear.
Exactly. It's about being willing to learn and grow, even if it means letting go of some of those ideas we have about ourselves.
Thinking about it, we've mostly focused on how overconfidence affects us personally. But what about when this tendency shows up in bigger groups?
Oh, that's a really important point. When overconfidence starts influencing groups or institutions, even whole societies, the impact can be huge.
Yeah, I can imagine. Where do we see that happening in real life?
Well, history gives us plenty of examples. Think about wars and conflicts.
Okay.
Leaders often underestimate their opponents or overestimate their own, military strength, and that can have devastating consequences.
It's like that quote, know your enemy and know yourself. Overconfidence messes that up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It creates this illusion of control, this feeling that we know more than we actually do.
And it's not just in wars, is it?
Nope, not at all. You see it in financial markets, too. Like, when people are super optimistic and think the good times will just keep rolling, it can lead to those speculative bubbles that eventually burst.
Like the dot-com bubble back in the 90s.
Exactly. Lots of hype, everyone overestimated the value of things, and then, boom, it all crashes down.
And closer to home, even with, the environment, there's a lot of overconfidence in our ability to control nature.
Right. Like we can just keep taking and taking without any consequences.
It's like a collective delusion that we're somehow above the laws of nature.
Yeah, pretty dangerous one. It shows how important it is to have humility, not just as individuals, but as a society.
Like a shared understanding that we're all connected and need to respect the planet's limits.
Exactly. So, knowing what we now know about overconfidence, how can we actually use it in a good way while avoiding all the bad stuff?
That's the million-dollar question.
Well, a lot of it comes down to awareness. The more we understand this tendency, the better we can spot our own biases and work on challenging them.
So basically, a bit of self-reflection can go a long way.
Definitely. But we also need to change things on a bigger scale, like build institutions and systems that are more resistant to overconfidence.
How do we do that?
Well, one important step is to encourage different opinions and have open discussions. Groupthink, where everyone just agrees and nobody questions anything. That can be a breeding ground for overconfidence.
Right, like if everyone's thinking the same thing, maybe nobody's thinking at all.
Exactly. We need spaces where people feel safe to disagree, where evidence and data are more important than just gut feelings.
And that ties back into the idea of humility, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Humility is key for making good decisions, both for individuals and for groups.
So basically, recognizing that we don't have all the answers, we're always learning, and being open to new ideas and perspectives.
Well said. I think that's really the main takeaway from our deep dive into overconfidence today. It's not about getting rid of confidence completely, but about finding that sweet spot between believing in yourself and being humble.
Yeah, knowing your strengths, but also recognizing your limitations. And facing challenges with a good dose of realism, knowing that we can learn from our mistakes.
That's a great way to put it.
This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your insights.
My pleasure. It's been a really engaging discussion.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about your day, maybe ask yourself, where could a little humility make a difference? In your decisions, your relationships, even just in how you talk to yourself. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
This is DigitView.